I think this might be the most powerful folding e-bike I've seen to date. Stay tuned and I'll take you through a few tips on assembly, and then we'll get it out on the road to see if it proves true. And so here's the first tip. It's what to do with the box. When you open the box, a lot of people will pick up the bike and move it out. No, don't do that. What you want to do is cut down the sides, lay the flap down, and now you have a nice clean area to work while you assemble the bike. So let's get going and do that first. Once you've made the cuts, lay it flat. Now you have the perfect work area. So what I'm going to do is skip ahead. I'll take all the packing material off, and then there are a couple things that I want to show you, and everything else is pretty easy. Hot here in North Carolina today. So I've got it all laid out. You can see what comes with it. Before we get into the critical assembly steps I want to cover, I just want to point out why I think this is going to be an absolutely awesome folding e-bike. And it all comes down to power. This is a powerful 750 watt motor in the back that will peak at 1300 watts. I've never seen anything like that. And it couples that with 90 Newton meters of torque, and that should be enough to get you up pretty much any hill. But that's not all. It also has an independent rear suspension, which I just think is going to be awesome. So let's jump into the assembly, because there's two critical things that I want to cover that you could make a mistake on. Well, actually there's three. And the first one is you need to grab the manual and read what the steps are, because that'll certainly help you out quite a bit. Now I'm going to deviate a little bit from those just to be able to show you what I've learned over multiple assemblies of multiple e-bikes. Now, the first thing you need to do is take the battery out. And the reason is twofold. One, you want to get that charging up so you can immediately go out and ride this thing. And the second is, when you're manipulating this thing, you don't need to deal with the additional weight of the battery. One quick thing on the battery, I'm happy to see that it lists the certifications here, so you know this battery should be okay. So the next step, and this is critical, is to get the handlebars aligned with the front fork. And I'm going to show you a trick. Well, the first thing you do, of course, is you put your handlebars in with the display on the left, and then you're going to open it up, and then it's this bolt right here with the hex bolt that you want to tighten up. But before you tighten it all the way down, you need to make sure that this is perfectly aligned with the front fork, which will then align the wheel. So let me show you the trick. You see this right here? This is the bolt that goes across, and then down here is the support that's going to hold your fender and your light. And so what I'm doing is I'm lining this up, because I know that's straight. I'm lining it up on there by looking through here and getting everything perfectly aligned. If you do that, you should be good to go. Now that we have the handlebars on, this is the last critical tip I want to share with you, which is how to put on the front wheel without bending the rotor. A lot of e-bikes want you to pick this up and then put it down on the wheel. Well, I find that that's awful hard. In fact, as I mentioned, I bent the rotor on my very first e-bike doing that. And that's why we took out the battery, because what we want to do is turn this over where this is just sitting, and then we can slowly put the wheel in from the top. Now what I use to do this is something called handlebar jacks, which go on the end of the handlebars and form a tripod which will hold the controls away from the ground. You can do the same thing with a couple books. Just align them with your handlebars. Let me show you what it looks like. So here's what the handlebar looks like installed, and I'll put one over there, and then we'll flip the bike over. Pretty easy to get it all flipped over, and now it'll be easy also, while it's upside down, to install the pedals. So the next step is to remove this, take out the spacer between the brake pads, and now I can gently put the wheel on following the rest of the instructions. This is so much easier because now I can guide the rotor between those brake pads without bending anything. Looking good? Don't worry about any noise you hear, because you have to bed the brakes first and then we can adjust them. So the next step is to take this, put it in, and tighten it down from the other side. That's it for the complicated part. Now it's just a matter of following the instructions, install the fenders, the pedals, screw on the headlight, and you're basically done. So let's review some of the specs of this thing, which I think indicate that it's going to be probably the best folding e-bike that I've ever tested. So many of them, I had to have a cheat sheet here. So I've already mentioned the fact that it's got probably the most powerful peak wattage of any motor I've ever reviewed at 1300 watts. And that 90 Newton meters of torque, boy, that's at the top end too. I only know of one other bike, and it's a regular fat tire bike, not a folding bike, that equals that performance in terms of torque. Now, the drive system, while we're talking about it, isn't a normal Bafang drive system. It's a submodel of Bafang called Pseudo, which is supposed to be even better. The 13 amp hour battery will produce 65 miles of range, if you pedal some. It's got this pretty much the standard 7-speed Shimano shifter, and if you unlock it, it'll achieve a max speed of 28 miles an hour. Here in North Carolina, the max is 20 to be a Class 2 bike, so I'm going to leave it at that. I mentioned earlier that the brakes have a 180 millimeter rotor. They are mechanical brakes, and the pads look like they're pretty good. It came with a derailleur guard, which one of my more expensive bikes did not come with, and I think that's a plus if you're going to take this into some rough areas. Fenders, rear rack. A lot of people don't like fenders. I like them because I don't like having mud splattered on my front and the back. And I love the rear rack because that will allow me to carry gear on the back, specifically my fishing gear. And you can see that the milk crate that has all my rods and things like that is going to fit back here just fine. Now the 4-inch wide fat 20-inch tires should be just fine to get through the sand. And while we're talking about those tires, they are puncture resistant, so I shouldn't have to worry about any sharp oyster shells or anything like that ruining my day. It does have a front fork suspension. It's also got the rear suspension that I talked about earlier, right there. This bike only weighs 65 pounds with the battery, so if you take the battery out, that probably gets it down to about 58. I'll have to weigh the battery later. It's got 5 levels of power assist, which is pretty standard. The display is a small display, and I'll show you that once I put the battery back in on the test ride. Straight handlebars, adjustable seat. I think this thing is going to be good to go. The next thing is to see, will it fit in a Prius? Once it's folded up, you'll realize that it's fairly awkward to lift this thing in. And that's where this pro tip comes in. Get a cord, make 2 loops, run it through your tires, and this will give you something to hold on to. So I'll grab the battery compartment and then this. So you can see it won't fit into the Prius if I go straight in, but if I lay it on the side, I'm not going to have any problem. This is why you need to be sure you have a pad in here. Now you've got a decision to make here. Do you lay it on the side with the derailleur guard, or do you lay it on the side where the handlebars are folded down? If you lay it on this side, there'll be a lot of pressure on the handlebars. So I think I'm going to rely on the derailleur guard to do its job and put it on the left-hand side. There we go. Fits just fine. This video is getting a little bit long, so we'll do the test drive in a subsequent video. Stay tuned for that. I'm expecting outstanding performance. Take care.